Welcome to the ADHD Open Space Podcast. My name is Gray Miller, and I will be your host and facilitator as we explore ideas, workarounds, accommodations, and other aspects of being a professional adult with ADHD. Most of this will come from my perspective as a cis white male in his mid-50s, living in the Midwest, who found out a year ago that I've been living with ADHD my entire life. I am not an expert on ADHD, except maybe in not knowing I've had it for half a century and somehow still getting by. But I promise to cite my sources, or at least admit when I'm repeating something I read on the interwebs. If I say anything you don't agree with, you're welcome to call me on it and let me know. This podcast is also part of the lead-up into the first ADHD Open Space happening in Madison, Wisconsin on January 20th, 2024. You can learn more about that event both here in the show and at the website adhdopen.space. The first 30 episodes of this podcast are also being released as part of National Podcast Post Month, NaPodPoMo. That means things might get a little rough, but it's going to be fun. Kind of like ADHD, right? Enjoy the show. The least helpful advice I've been given about ADHD. Please stop telling me my brain is special. First published on medium.com on January 27th, 2023 by Gray Miller. There are two kinds of people when it comes to ADHD. On the one side, there are people like Dr. Russell Barkley, whose research has led him to call ADHD the diabetes of psychology. He says, quote, "It's a chronic disorder that must be managed every day to prevent the secondary harms it's going to cause. ADHD is the most treatable disorder in psychiatry." And on the other side, people reject the idea that it's a disorder at all. I'm not talking about the ableist idiots, that, by the way, is an entirely unbiased and scientifically backed label, who claim ADHD doesn't exist at all. No, I'm talking about people like Thom Hartmann, a radio host and author of ADHD, A Hunter in a Farmer's World. Their premise is that a brain that doesn't process dopamine as efficiently gives a person very valuable skills. Can't focus on what's in front of you or sit still? That's because your hunter ancestors were constantly scanning their environment, ready to leap into action when a threat or prey was spotted. And once the chase began, that hyper-focus was really handy in running the potential food to the ground. It's a bias towards action. And in a hunter-gatherer society, that was really useful, not a disorder at all. Now, they can both be right. I'm not enough of an academic to dispute either claim, though I do give the latter a bit of side-eye due to their whole evolutionary psychology aspects. I also very much appreciate the friends and readers who, when I first went public about my own experience, were quick to reassure me that there was nothing wrong with me at all. As one Medium commenter put it, "ADHD sounds like it's your superpower, dude. Because your brain's wired differently, you have the ability to add a different perspective to our consensus world as well as to life its own self. One that might prove exceptionally valuable for some other person who's also, quote, neurodivergent, or whatever the guys in the white lab coats are now calling it. I'm wondering why you are not celebrating." Now, I appreciate that. I do. I understand the intent, and I have done it myself. For example, did you know that people who live with depression have a more accurate worldview than people without it? That's a definite advantage over all those optimists, so cheer up. Depression is your superpower. And it still sucks. More to the point, I can't buy groceries or pay rent with my different perspective, no matter how much it has added to life its own self. And my inability to keep track of what bills need to be paid when, or remember to pick up my daughter from the mall before it closes, is not, quote, exceptionally valuable to anyone. Personally, I do not find that particular reframe valuable. It echoes the so much potential and you could be anything you want if you'd only apply yourself tropes that I grew up with. I can be anything I want, sure, except be a person without ADHD. Or, for a little over half a century, even a person who knew they had ADHD. Perhaps the easiest way to explain why I have a problem with this particular philosophy of ADHD is through the quote that is often cited in videos, articles, and discussions. It's a quote that was almost certainly not from Albert Einstein. Everyone is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Now, there's one big problem with that metaphor. I'm still a fish in a forest. I've been watching as my peers seem to effortlessly build tree houses, visit each other's branches, amass beautiful leaf collections, and talk about how they can't wait to visit a canopy, while I have flopped and gasped and done the best I could with a hacked-together water tank strapped to my gills and mismatched shoes on my fins. If I sound frustrated, it's simply because, until recently, nobody told me I was a fish. Rest assured, most of the anger and resentment is self-directed, nor do I want to take away from anyone else whatever reframe helps them come to terms with their own experience of ADHD. For me, though, the ADHD is a superpower philosophy feels like the Horatio Alger of psychology. It breaks what Jacqueline Paul, the author of Order from Chaos, calls rule number 1. You must make peace with reality. We are fish in forest, where success is measured by what trees you live in. The ability to breathe underwater doesn't mean much. It is, at best, a curiosity, a fairy tale vignette of success against the odds. So what's a guppy to do? I don't really have the answer to that, though I appreciate that there are many, many people here and there and hopefully coming to the ADHD open space and other places on the internet that are trying to figure it out. That, perhaps, is the first step. Pool our knowledge. Not really sorry I said that, if you will. For better or worse, I live in the forest. The most useful thing right now is to find and build things that make it easier for me to do so. I do see the rare instances of pescatory glory there in the branches, and it is absolutely inspiring. But if this was a superpower, it would be easy, and it ain't that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the ADHD Open Space Podcast. Again, my name is Gray Miller. If you have any comments or questions about the show, you can feel free to leave them on the podcast page at adhdsubstack.com/podcast, or you can email me directly, Gray, Gray, at adhdopen.space. The background music for the intro and outro are from pixabay.com and are called Funny Days Together by Background Music Lab, used under a YouTube Content ID license.